Alright, so I got mostly everything pulled off here that we need to pull the engine out. Just left enough wiring and everything and the fuel lines hooked up to get it in the shop here. But unfortunately the axle nuts on the outside that I usually pull and just pull the axles out with the transmission are stuck more than I care to try to get out. So we're going to go ahead and put it up on the lift, and it's a lot easier to get the dog bone mount loose and everything there anyway. So we'll go ahead and get everything from the underneath that way. Obviously we don't have to worry about the exhaust, so that's nice. But other than that, yeah, there's just a lot of hoses back in here, and honestly a lot of it's harder to get because you don't have this whole section cut out here. That sure made it nice for getting these hoses back in there and then getting your transmission all disconnected. But just the main thing is be careful with all the electrical plugs. It's pretty easy to trace out where everything goes, but it is really easy to break those plugs off. So anyway, I think that's about it. We'll go ahead and get this done underneath. I didn't get the video of this thing up on the lift, but there really wasn't a whole lot to take out. You can see the CV axle hanging down there. It's just getting those bolts off to get those two loose down there on both sides. And then that, you can kind of see the dog bone or the torsion strut mount on the bottom. There's just two bolts there. And yeah, other than the exhaust off the back, that's about really all you've got to deal with. You get mostly everything else from the top side here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out the clutch slave cylinder and finish disconnecting the wiring, and we'll be ready to pull this thing out. So I've done this one other time now, but it's actually kind of slick to use my lift to pull these engines out, at least when you're doing this front facing where you back it out. I don't really have a cherry picker since I use my skid steer for everything, but this is pretty cool. You can pretty much control it just like you would a cherry picker. Drop it down. Way. Get it right out there. Alright, there it is out, and we're ready to get to work on it. I'm gonna probably pressure wash the backside first thing, get the transmission off. We're probably gonna do a new oil pan while we're at it, and then it's gonna have obviously different turbo, different intake, so pretty much all that stuff's just getting pulled off. And yeah, we'll get the coolant kind of set up how we want it and go from there. But that's about the most convenient way I've found to pull these engines out, really. Do it all in one chunk. Alright, got the thing all pressure washed all the way around, and we are just getting it prepped and ready to put in the truck. Hopefully not having to pull it out again. So yeah, I just wanted to go over a few things that are kind of last minute details that you definitely don't want to forget about, or things you're going to run into, I should say. So this coolant pipe that's like the return for the oil cooler and the heater core, usually that's going to run across, all the way across the back. There it is, running clear over there. It's interesting, I found quite a few variations in these, I guess, over the years, and between auto and manual, they did quite a few different things on it. So, like, here's another one here. I think this is for an automatic. But anyway, most of the manual ones have a mounting point down here. Either this port, I've seen them up here. And that's nice because you can cut this right here, or wherever. It's nice if it's right here. Everything's shifted over then. Because like for here, this, like the Chevy mount and the Toyota mount, they would be covering this up, and so I'd have to cut this back even more. But with the TD conversions mount, it comes out far enough that this will work perfect, just cutting it off like this. I've still got the return from the oil cooler, and then this guy will go out, and that'll go to the heater core. And that, then I don't even have to do anything. There's a mount here to do it with, but like this automatic one, it's still got the port here for the oil cooler, but there's no mounts on the whole thing. So your best bet with that one is you're still going to want to cut it off here, but you're going to have to weld a tab on so that you can use one of these bolt holes, most likely. It just depends. Like I say, with the TD conversions, with it going spaced out like that, you can actually leave it in place, but it is kind of annoying. Clear over there, and you can cut it off over here. So that's another option, but you definitely have to get that figured out before the mounting plate's going to go on. And one other thing, being 5 years in now, I've ran into issues where I needed to change the oil pan and stripped out the plug or whatever, and they're cheap oil pans, but these plates do not, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's two bolts right there that go up into the rear main seal, and there's access, but you can't get to them because of the angle. So what I do for that, at least on this TD conversions plate, is I take a notch out right there. Of course, this is a used plate, but I'd still say do it even on your brand new one, just because you can see those line up with those ports, and it gives you just enough to be able to slide your extension in with like a swivel socket and get onto those bolts. And then you can change the oil pan without pulling the engine, basically, or pulling the transmission. So yeah, I fought trying to get those bolts out so much with the plate on that is definitely something I would do. Other than that, the only other real thing that you've got to figure out is your coolant flange here. And just to show you on this guy, this is the automatic one, which is not a bad option. It gives you, this port is pretty big for the heater core. You got to kind of reduce that down, but it doesn't give you any options for putting in your temperature sensor if you're going to use factory gauges. And so for the Dakota, we're going to try use this metal one here. And so I'm going to make a plate over this, and I'm hoping, since the temperature sensor is so small for the Dakota, that I can screw it in right here. It's going to be super tight, but if I can put it right there, that'll give me room to put a 3/8 NPT fitting on this side. They'll be right next to each other, and you can get both of them in there. Otherwise, I might try tap the temperature sensor in right here on the side. We'll have to see, but those are the big things. Obviously, with these sticking out like this, you've got to have some pretty good firewall clearance to be able to do that. But those are kind of the last minute details before you can get the engine in. And everything else can pretty much be done while it's in there. But those are just things I wanted to go over that I won't be able to show you once the engine's in there. But that, and we got the motor mounts. They're a little crazy looking, but hopefully these Dodge mounts ride really nice and smooth, so I'm hoping it's worth dealing with this. But we've adapted this guy for the, I'll try to show you here. This guy is going to sit right here on, hey Creed, on the passenger side and give room for everything there. What do you think, dude? Watch out. Hold on. And then this guy looks a little crazy, but once you see here, you get this thing in there, and this is about where it has to go. It's just tucked around everything. And I've got just enough room for the AC lines, and I'm right on the side of the frame right here. So that. What are you talking about, dude? Oh. Alright, and then lastly, the only things I've really changed in the engine bay area is, so the factory passenger side mount stays the same, and then the driver's side mount I had to move back because again, I think I talked about this earlier, but the pitman arm was pointed way up on this. Well, because this is a steering box out of a Jeep Cherokee, and for the 1-ton swap, and so they had it cocked way up to miss a lot of stuff where the engine was and everything else with the V8. But we're actually going to drop it down lower, which means, I mean, we couldn't use the motor mount there anyway, but reusing it and putting it back there just gave us room to drop this and get the pitman arm out of the way, and so we don't have to worry about that anymore. I haven't finished mounting that, but it is ready there. And then the only other thing, I went a little too big with my hole there, but you have to notch the bell housing for the starter. I could have just made it the size of the starter gear, but I wasn't sure how far the starter came through the plate. So it doesn't have to be quite that huge, but I'm probably just going to plate over the top of it anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. And then I've got my TV cable set up here. If you remember on the Chevy, I went ahead and ran that into the cab, and then I have a lever or a bar that I mount to the VW throttle, and that's going to pull the TV cable to increase the line pressures as you step on the gas. So that'll probably get tucked up against the firewall there, so that I don't have to change the length of that or anything. And yeah, we'll get all this wiring and everything cleaned up once it's in, see where everything can get tucked away at. But we are ready to get that engine back in here.